Today I'm going to talk about what I think are 10 of the biggest sleep myths. I decided to take this approach instead of talking about sleep science because sleep science is really a discipline in itself. You could spend an entire career on it easily. I provide resources in the accompanying PDF to this video for those who wish to learn more about sleep science. Here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about 10 of the biggest sleep myths, and hopefully by doing so, I'll get you to stop worrying about things that maybe aren't as important for sleep as you think they are, so you can focus your energies on more productive areas. Another reason that I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about sleep science and the benefits of sleep is at this point, the science behind sleep and the benefits of sleep are so well established that debating the merits of sleep and the importance of sleep is kind of like debating flat earth theorists. This is a non-exhaustive list of the things that we know are adversely affected by sleep. Sleep science is a very dynamic field, and we're constantly learning more about the benefits of sleep and the adverse effects of poor sleep. So what we know about the adverse effects of poor sleep is very damning, and the truth is probably a lot worse. Before we get into the 10 sleep myths, some basic sleep science is in order. Here, I'm going to briefly introduce the concept of a daily sleep requirement and cumulative sleep debt. Let's say for the sake of argument that the average person needs 8 hours of sleep a night. Do they? We'll address that shortly, but right now that's our working assumption. So you need 8 hours of sleep a night. Let's say you're going into this time period fully rested, you have 0 sleep debt. Day 1, you need 8 hours, you get 8 hours. You've got 0 sleep debt. Same on day 2. You need 8, you get 8, 0 sleep debt. However, day 3 rolls around. We still need 8 hours, but we only get 7 hours, so we're accumulating an hour of sleep debt. Same on day 4. Need 8, get 7. Now we get another hour of sleep debt. We add that to our first hour. We now have 2 hours of cumulative sleep debt. However, day 5 rolls around. We usually need 8, plus we've got our additional 2 hours of sleep debt that we need to pay off. We get it. We're fully paid up. We've got 0 sleep debt. That last hypothetical example, unfortunately, represented wishful thinking. This is probably much more typical of the average American. You need 8 hours, you get 6, you accumulate 2 hours of sleep debt. Day 2, same thing. Now you're up to 4, 6, 8, 10, etc. How much sleep debt can you accumulate? That's an excellent question. Because of the ethics and practicality of keeping people in sleep labs and sleep depriving them and monitoring them for days and weeks and months on end, all that we know is that you can accumulate sleep debt for at least 2 weeks, and you can accumulate at least 30 hours of sleep debt. So that's what we know. The truth is probably much worse. That gets us to sleep myth number 1, the 8-hour sleep requirement. Although it is true that the average person needs 8 hours of sleep a night, it's also true that the average family has 1.9 kids, and that statistic's probably not relevant to your particular situation either. The best estimates are that sleep requirements follow an approximately normal or bell-shaped distribution with a mean of 8 hours and a standard deviation of 1 hour. What does that mean in English? It means that approximately 68% of the population is going to fall within the 7 to 9 hour range for sleep requirements. And approximately 95% of the population is going to fall within the 6 to 10 hour range. And any other stragglers, and there's not going to be many, are going to fall within the remaining 5 to 11 hour range. So although 8 hours is an average, you might need less and you might need more. And if you're sleep deprived, you might need considerably more for an extended period of time until you get that sleep debt paid off. That gets us to sleep myth number 2, the myth of the so-called super sleepers. These are the people who claim to be able to get by on 5 hours of sleep a night or less, represented by the mythical super sleeper comic book shield. Obviously, Feltovich Fit needs an art department. If you followed the explanation for sleep myth number 1, then this myth is almost self-apparent. These people either don't exist or they're exceedingly rare, much like 7-footers and people who run a 4-minute mile, and not worth serious attention here. People who are sleeping this little are likely doing permanent damage to themselves and putting others at risk through increased risk of accidents. The next myth is oversleeping. The way that this myth typically materializes is that people who are chronically sleep deprived will sleep for an extended period of time, and yet they'll still feel sleepy because they still have unpaid sleep debt. Yet, because they slept for an extended period of time, they will associate their sleepiness with oversleeping rather than associating it with the true culprit, which is unpaid sleep debt. For the average person, the risks of oversleeping are vastly outweighed by the risks of undersleeping. So the best advice I can give to the average person is to sleep as much as you can, when you can, especially if you're one of the sleep-deprived Americans, which is likely the majority. The next myth is the myth that you can bank sleep or somehow accumulate a sleep surplus. This is the guy who says, I've got a busy week at work this week, or I'm going to be traveling this week, so I'm going to sleep a lot this weekend to somehow compensate for that sleep deprivation that I'm going to face during the week. Although there is such a thing as sleep debt, there's unfortunately no such thing as a sleep surplus. So beyond paying off existing accumulated sleep debt before entering those stressful periods, there's nothing you can do to prepare for those types of periods, and you still have your minimum sleep requirement every day, and if you don't meet it, you will be accumulating a sleep debt. The next myth is eating before bed. Don't eat before bed because it might adversely affect your sleep. Does it? I don't know, you tell me. Some people, including myself, can eat a steak dinner before bed and sleep just fine. Some people, if they have a French fry, they're up all night with acid reflux. It just depends on you. To the extent I have seen any research on eating before bed and its potential adverse effects, it typically advises against things you shouldn't be doing anyway. Don't eat a high carb, high sugar diet. Don't eat things that give you indigestion. Don't overeat, etc. Also, related is the myth that eating before bed will somehow make you fat. Total nonsense. Bodybuilders, the masters of body composition, eat all the time, at all hours of the day, including before bed. Some of them will even have a protein shake handy in case they get up in the middle of the night and have to go to the bathroom. So what you eat and the amount that you eat is far more important for body composition than when you eat it. The next myth is the myth of the food coma, this notion that certain types of food can make you sleepy. This myth has at least two origins. One is people are often sleep deprived and prone to fall asleep anyway. And two, your body's natural circadian rhythm or level of alertness fluctuates throughout the day and reaches its low point at approximately mid-afternoon or soon after lunch. So often what happens is people will go out for lunch, then they'll come back to their desk, they're already sleep deprived and prone to fall asleep, and their body's circadian rhythm has just reached its natural low point for the day. So they doze off at their desk, and then they blame it on the carbs. Another source of this myth is Thanksgiving dinner, the tryptophan in the turkey. If tryptophan did cause sleepiness, then lots of other foods would cause sleepiness too, as they contain as much or more of the substance than turkey does. What's more likely the culprit is that you ate too much, and if you eat too much of anything, it'll make you slow and groggy. And all the booze you drank to tolerate your relatives probably didn't help either. The next myth involves artificial light and especially electronic screens. Now, this isn't a myth in the sense that these things don't affect sleep adversely. They do, that's well-established science. The myth is the sense that this is the best use of your time to be worrying about those things. What are you going to do? Are you going to wage war against artificial light? Are you going to go back in time and kill Thomas Edison? Unfortunately, the battle against artificial light is lost. It's everywhere and there's not a whole lot we can do about it. What is a much better use of your time, in my experience, is to try to establish a bedtime routine doing something that relaxes you. And if that involves watching cat videos on YouTube, then great. If you establish a relaxing bedtime routine and you still have trouble sleeping, then try to further curtail artificial light, especially in the sleeping area and especially towards bedtime. And also try to attack the demand side of the equation and not just the supply with these UVEX Skyper glasses. Just remember, don't wear them out in public unless you're single and wish to remain so. Myth number 8 has to do with naps. Some people, and even sometimes entire countries and cultures, nap habitually and sleep just fine at night. Previously, we discussed the body's natural circadian rhythm or level of alertness. When it reaches its low point mid-afternoon, you can either fight it or you can use the opportunity as a chance to take a nap. If you do nap and you find yourself having trouble sleeping at night, then as a first step, shorten the naps or move them to an earlier point in the day. The last thing I'll say about napping is that people who nap excessively are often doing so because they have accumulated sleep debt. So if you find yourself in that predicament, then as a first step, pay off that excessive sleep debt and you'll usually find yourself napping a lot less. The next myth has to do with caffeine. Again, this isn't a myth in the sense that caffeine can't adversely affect your sleep. It absolutely can. The myth comes about when people start trying to assign numbers to it. Don't consume such and such amount of caffeine, or cut your caffeine intake off after a certain time in the day. Before proceeding, some basic coffee science is in order. First, I'm going to introduce the concept of a BCC, a blood coffee concentration, and I'm also going to introduce the concept of a coffee half-life. For the average person, caffeine has a half-life of approximately 5 hours. So that means that, again, for the average person, if you consume 4 cups of coffee at 12 p.m. noon, by the time 5 p.m. rolls around, you still got about 2 cups of coffee's worth of caffeine in your bloodstream. By the time 10 p.m. rolls around and you're starting to get ready for bed, you still have about 1 cup of coffee's worth of caffeine in your bloodstream. The problem with this analysis is that, again, this is for an average person. Depending on your individual physiology, you might metabolize coffee a lot faster and you might metabolize it slower. Other factors that can affect the rate of metabolism are exercise. Exercise is going to tend to increase the rate of metabolism the way it does for other drugs. Probably even more dramatic is the effect that any other drugs or medications that you might be taking could have. Nicotine can accelerate the process of caffeine metabolism by as much as 40%, and oral contraceptives can slow it down by as much as double. Other drugs can have an even more dramatic effect. So if you're having trouble sleeping, you should consider curtailing your coffee consumption, and depending on any drugs or medications you might be taking, you might have to curtail it significantly or even eliminate it altogether. The next myth is exercise. Sleep is associated with a decrease in your body temperature. Exercise, of course, is going to increase your body temperature, which could adversely affect your ability to fall asleep. The question then becomes, does it? Some people exercise late in the evening and sleep just fine. For others, it adversely affects your sleep. For me, I found that the cutoff is approximately 3 hours before bed. If you do exercise in the evening and you find that you have trouble sleeping, as a first step, try moving your exercise to earlier in the day. As a general rule, less intensive exercises like Tai Chi, restorative yoga, those can probably be done safely in the evening, and the more rigorous exercises should probably be moved to earlier in the day. That concludes sleep myths. By dispelling some of the myths associated with sleep, I hope that I've helped you focus your attention in more productive areas. The last thing I want you to do before you fall asleep tonight is hit that like and subscribe button, as your subscriptions are what makes this content possible. Also, if you have questions or comments or things you'd like to see in future episodes, leave those in the comments area. Until next time, sweet dreams.